It's tabletop time! I'm Dave.
And I'm Jen.
That was the best intro we've ever done. Painting and the hobby in general has evolved so much over the years. We thought it would be really fun to compare some of the awesome projects we've had the opportunity to work on recently. In this video, we thought we'd explore how much our hobby has changed over the last 20 or 30 years and all the amazing new conveniences that make it so much easier today. So to do that, I'm going to be painting an OG model from the 90s using the tools and techniques that I had available to me back in the day.
We're also going to be trying out a new lamp from Redgrass Games and seeing how it stacks up with other types of lamps.
I love lamp. I love lamp.
So Jen, you're going to be taking the high-tech modern approach to painting. You get the wet palettes, the Redgrass Games lights, everything.
Airbrush, I get it all.
I don't even have thinned paints. This is going to be fun.
Sorry, Duncan.
Brick, are you just looking at things in the office and saying that you love them?
So while we do have a very fancy setup, I'm trying to get as close as I can to what I had access to when I was young. Paper towel, that was okay. Water, we did have water, but I definitely didn't have a fancy wet palette. So I'm gonna have to find a bit of plastic to use as a palette. Most of the paints I had as a kid were from the Lord of the Rings magazine. So I'm also gonna look at some of my old models and color match as best as I can the colors to what I had access to. I did find Cantor Blue. I know I always used Cantor Blue, but most of these are old, dry 20-year-old pots that I would have used. So I'm gonna set about finding all the appropriate time-accurate materials and see how my classic metal Chaos Terminator comes up. So it was in hobby stores, not unlike this one, that as a little kid, I used to sit exactly like this, cross-legged on the floor in front of the Citadel racks of models and basically just wish and dream away at the kits I could get, eventually saving up for little blister packs like the, I think, $18 for 2 Chaos Terminator blisters. So I think to really go down the nostalgia pipeline and have the feel for what the game and the hobby was like 20 years ago, the only appropriate thing I can do is ignore all of these gorgeous new models and paint one of those classic Chaos Terminators. Now, of course, the Citadel color overhaul didn't happen until 2012, and a lot of paints like Contrast simply didn't exist. So when I started, I basically had the paints that I got from the Battle for Middle-earth magazine and a single brush. As well as leaving behind the fancy models, I have to leave behind all the paint that I'm used to, and the brushes, and we're at old school.
Space Crusade takes you into warp space to fight the force of chaos. Deep in a parallel universe where nightmares are real.
Now, Chaos Black was around back in the day. I'm allowing myself some Chaos Black, but just look at the glory of the miniatures I used to paint as a child.
Oh my god, these are metal.
This one's plastic. This is plastic with the old Possess Brew. It's jank though.
Yeah, it's a lot of blobbiness, eh? Not much detail.
One thick coat. That's all I was allowing myself to do. Now, I didn't have my classic paints that I got from the Battle for Middle-earth game because that's how I painted as a child. So I was using some nice substitutes, modern Vallejo paints, but I thought I'd match the colors pretty closely to what I'd used.
Yeah, this looks really similar to what you would have gotten in one of those like little Citadel sets with the paintbrush and the tiny little pot. Very close.
Now, going back to working with metal miniatures was perfectly fine. It's funny how as a child I remember these being agonizing to work with, but I think it was honestly a factor of strength. Like, I'm an adult now, so it's really easy for me to clip these soft metal things and like shave them off. But when I was originally doing it as like a 10-year-old, I had blunt knives and 10-year-old fingers, and this was a lot more of a challenge.
Look, call me a child, but this to me just looks like an absolute nightmare. Hard pass on working with metal.
The nostalgia bit for the first time, pulling down the lever on this Chaos Black and seeing spray paint go on a over 20-year-old, almost 30-year-old, I'd guess now, Chaos Terminator was pretty cool. There was a weird little part of me that remembered actually being 10 years old, maybe 12 years old, and spray painting these in, well, a very similar place. It's nice. I thought I'd left these in the past, but I guess there's a little part of me that still remembers the joy. Let's do this boy proud. As I leapt into the retro painting project, I found it immediately really hard to just do one thick coat. I wanted to feather this out there and use the black as some shading because, of course, I don't have any washers. I'm not allowed to use washers. But very quickly, I just said, no, Dave, you have to paint this like you did as a kid. Let's see if years of painting experience make much difference.
I do have a question though. Did you used to paint your pieces all separately or the model as a whole?
With these metal ones, I painted them separately, but with the plastic ones, I'd glue them together. I used some of my glorious old metal Terminators as a perfect example to work out exactly what I was going to paint, what areas I was painting in what colors, and then I set about diving in with the white.
Oof, this is harsh. This bright, thick line of white.
It's the worst color choice ever, but I was a child, so don't hold it against me. I will say that going white directly onto black with one thick coat also leaves for a really lumpy, horrible texture, so I do not recommend.
That being said, I'm actually impressed of the coverage you got with a blob of white paint.
There's a reason I use Vallejo whites over Citadel whites. One thing I've noticed while painting these is I can definitely say for sure that my paint scheme when I was a kid sucked. This is so ugly. Like the contrast of bright, pure, dead white with navy blue. Yeah, I don't know that it's a vibe. It's a struggle. It's a real struggle not to just swap subtly the white for like a gray and then kind of make it work. But I did realize that I think this color scheme may have in part been inspired by the Carlton Blues, which is my football team. And I was into football when I was a little kid, so it's possible. Navy blue and white. My desire to thin my paints properly is so strong, but I'm just like one thick coat, just like I did when I was young, but slightly more accurate, significantly more accurate.
So I've noticed that your brush control is actually pretty good. Maybe a talent you've learned over the many years of painting minis?
I think physical control over the brush is obviously a learnt skill, and you can see that in left hand versus right hand painting challenges, where your dominant hand will be able to paint, but your non-dominant hand you're not as good with. So it's kind of like that. Obviously I've improved in some ways, but in all honesty, I figure this probably took me longer to do because of that. And as I laid down the golds, one of the things I started to notice was actually that this bad paint job was taking me longer to paint than a good paint job using my newer painting techniques.
Oh, really?
Like this method of really deliberately base coating perfectly in these monotones in all the areas one by one and blocking them off was actually really slow. It was tedious, it was slow, and on these old metal models, I was surprised. This model overall took me about 4 hours to paint.
Interesting. Did you find with the metal models any of it like chipped off or anything?
Yes, and I did have to go back and fix a little bit of that as well. Following the gold, I painted this horrible dead flesh color.
Looks so like snot green. It's an awful color. I hate it.
Well, you know why I used it? Because all I had was the paints from the Middle Earth starter set, and I think this was one of the like goblin skin tones I had.
Yeah, sure, that I guess makes sense. Not green, goblin skin tone. What's the difference?
The skulls were painted in a bone white, and then the areas, a lot of tubes and things were all painted silver. I actually painted a lot of areas that I'd originally left black in my OG paint scheme silver, just to break up the colors on the model a little bit more. And while I did just use the single chainmail color, I felt this was just painting the model a little bit more accurately to the details on the model. And then with the tassels, the first touches of that bright red that I would liberally apply blood splashes on the model with began to become apparent.
Dude, does Chaos still have tassels on any of their models? That's so interesting.
Not enough. Chaos should have less demon bits and more tassels. Tell me if you agree. Comment in the comments if your team Chaos should have cool stuff and tassels and not be made of half a demon. This is my OG Chaos.
Yeah, I'm Team Tassel.
Finishing up with those thick coats on the spiky shoulder pads, I could glue the model together and then apply the final touch. And the final touch is gory red everywhere, a bright red that was meant to represent blood. Now, are you ready for the most 10-year-old metal thing ever?
Go on.
So, in my original lore that I came up when I was a tiny baby child, the chapter symbol for my custom faction of Chaos Space Marines was daubed onto their armor with their first ever kill.
That's actually really metal. That's awesome.
So the idea was that they would actually do this as novitiates, and once they'd become a Chaos Space Marine, sort of like as a scout, their first kill of worth, they would sever the arm off them and then paint using the stump. So that's why it's like a dot and a scraped line, because it's meant to be they dab it once, dab it twice, and drag, and that was the logo.
So you thought of all of this when you were a small child?
Yeah. I come from a family of divorce, so all of the pieces fall together.
I don't know if Lee will keep it in.
Why do you think that's so funny?
I know, it just, people are going to react to that very interestingly.
Weaponry.
Plasma gun! Dreadnought!
To battle through infested starships and win the highest rank. The ultimate encounter is here.
All right, Dave, that's enough time in the past. Let's head all the way to the much less distant past. Last year at PAX, the folks over at Last Hold Games had a booth where they scanned our heads and turned them into miniatures and busts for us to play and paint with. It was a really cool process, and they were really awesome to do this for us so we could have it to share with you guys, and each of us got a souvenir bust to take home and paint. This kind of 3D scanning technology, 3D printing, and of course loads of modern painting techniques will now have the opportunity to be put to the test and compared to your archaic methods of painting, Dave. Let's take one of these awesome busts and bring it to the future. Jen's gonna take her cutting-edge futuristic 3D scanned, 3D printed bust and paint it using only the most cutting-edge tools available only to the modern hobbyist.
Now, Jen, before you get into painting your amazing bust, we actually all got some gorgeous busts. They came out really well, so you can check them out here. We just wanted to give a big shout out and say thank you to Last Hold Games who did this for us at PAX. It's been a long time since PAX. Our schedule has been completely packed and we felt really bad it's taken so long to do something with these awesome busts. So we wanted to say if you're in Australia or internationally, please check them out. They're actually starting a new event type where they're taking the scanning directly to game stores and customers. So if you're a game store in Australia, why don't you reach out to them and try and organize one of those events? Get some bookings and some of your customers can become busts and be immortalized forever. What better an event trophy than using the bust of like the previous champion as the trophy that you win? That would be so cool. And anyway, I just want to tell you all about Last Hold Games. Please go check them out. Links are in the description.
And thanks again.
Hey Jen, enjoying the modern luxuries there?
Pretty good.
You with your spray booth, your painting lamp, your airbrush, your Squidmar airbrush.
Yeah, my wet palettes as well.
It's alright, boys. We got this. We got this, boys.
So to kick things off, I started with a black primer and then added in some color using red and a bit of orange on top.
Wow, that bust turned out so cool, Jen.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a different sort of perspective of how I would see myself. Originally, I kind of see myself as like a fairy or something kind of light and happy, but when I started putting these colors on, I kind of had this like tiefling feel to it, and I kind of liked it.
Well, your first D&D character was a tiefling.
That's true. So something I'm trying to work on as a painter is contrast. I find that sometimes some of the minis I paint can come out lacking that certain contrast I'm trying to chase. This time around, I wanted to work with a darker sort of base and work up into more vibrant colors. So I made sure to layer in those purples and those reds going to an orange to really make sure they were saturated and looked nice. Again, giving off this kind of evil feel, which I don't know if that was intentional, but hey, it's fun nevertheless. Once I was done with my airbrushing, I moved on to some layer painting, starting off with the skin. The skin and the face are probably my favorite place to start because, I don't know, I guess I'm used to it because I put on makeup every day. So I felt like this was kind of familiar ground for me. I worked in a bunch of skin tones, kind of trying to keep in the purple and the orange hues, but blending it all together nicely.
So how did you feel using the advanced fancy airbrush, Squidmar's airbrush, as well as the lovely wet palettes all lit by a nice lamp from above?
I have to say, all of these things are definitely a luxury, but they are so wonderful to use. The lighting was really nice, and I could see a lot of the colors I was using in places I needed to blend them in properly, which is good. Sometimes with lighting, it can be really difficult to see where you're actually painting things, or the light can shine funny, but I had no problems with this lamp. I could even adjust the beams to how I wanted them as well, so I could have light coming from the back and the front of it, just to make sure it was shining in all the places I needed.
Yeah, I've been working with the Redgrass Games lamp for a couple of weeks, and I think the amount that I've grown complacent to using it is a really good example of how good it is. I'm very used to it. I wouldn't reach for any other lamp in the studio. It's very nice, and I look forward to installing the ones we have on every workbench around the studio. I kind of wish we had one extra so I can pinch it and take it home.
So moving on to the hair, I decided this time to go with, well, the color my hair is now, which is kind of this purple burgundy color. I thought this matched well with the colors I'd laid down originally, being, well, purple. Luckily enough, I dyed my hair purple. So I went in with some lighter colors, just trying to imitate hair strands as I went through with brush strokes. Once I was happy with the purple, I started adding in more of a reddy tone to kind of give it that more burgundy or fuchsia color that I originally wanted my hair to be.
I really like these really vibrant, high contrast, like autumn leaves you're doing on the shoulders. What's that all about?
Oh, it's actually fur, but now that I'm looking back on it, I could totally see this as autumn leaves.
It's in autumn leaves. Oh my god, I'm sorry.
No, I think that that's kind of cool because this is a druid, and I think that purple and orange go really well together. Well, they're contrasting colors after all. I kind of vibe that. That's awesome.
Are you sure? I'm pretty sure that's leaves, bro.
No, they're fur.
I'm pretty sure it's leaves.
I'm like 90% certain it's fur. But hey, it doesn't really matter either way. I'm happy to go with fur leaves. Let's just call them that. Either way, I painted them how I actually would probably paint fur, starting with a base color and then going over just the tips with a lighter pale color. Moving on to the pieces of clothing, again, just layer painting these in as I usually would, but trying to keep within the tones that I had established. Because my model was based on a druid, I decided to incorporate a little bit of green this time around.
I'll admit it. I've just looked it up. It's fur. I'm looking at a tiny monitor. I'm sorry, Jen. I failed.
So coming back in the next day, I noticed that I was looking a little bit dark and a little bit too evil for my liking. So I went back over the top with my skin tone and blended it in a bit more and made myself look a little bit brighter.
Very well done, Jen. This is a nice bust for an afternoon's work.
Thank you. I'm actually really happy with this.
Now I cracked out the good stuff. I realized that I wanted to just see what it would be like to use the appropriate tools for the era, but what if I'd had access to washers? So I had a sealed in box packet of Citadel washers. Someone's going to say this is sacrilege to even open it.
This is a relic.
But I wanted to use the vintage stuff. So one thing I'd realized over this process is it didn't matter how good you were at painting. If you strip away the advanced techniques and you take away the capacity to use modern tools and the things we've learned today, your paint job is going to be pretty limited. My paint job looked basically a little bit crisper and neater than the paint jobs I did when I was 10 to 13 years old. And I've been painting for a long time. So color choice, paint choice, layering, highlighting, and shading are so crucial, as well as blending, to getting a good result in your miniature. And by limiting myself so exclusively to these single flat primary colors, I felt like I really proved to myself how much technique and tools are vital. So I actually recommend everyone learn as much as they can. Go watch some awesome YouTube channels with really cool painters teaching you all the tips to get better, and go out there and buy some of those products. You'll see here how much a wash alone, even one from the early thousands, helps uplift this extremely basic paint job, especially in areas such as the gold and the bone. Well, thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable seeing the contrast between old school painting and all the little bits and bobs we have today.
You're not gonna lie, I'm not gonna give up any of the stuff that I currently use to paint my miniatures with. It is all gold.
No, and I cannot wait to cleanse my palette by painting something actually properly and nicely. It's going to be very satisfying. Thank you to our patrons for all your support and your love. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and consider signing up to our Patreon and supporting us make all the content we do. 2 videos a week is a lot to keep up
We
with.
really appreciate your support.
Well, what a fun journey we've just been on. I can barely tell which model I actually painted versus the old ones I painted.
I legit actually can't tell.
It's this one. He has a wash on him and the layers are a bit smoother. That's it.
So you can paint like you did back when you were a child.
That's what I've achieved. I think it really shows how much tools and modern equipment does help the painting process, but more than anything, it's knowledge. When I was a kid, I didn't have knowledge. We didn't have the internet for painting, and all we got was the articles we could comprehend from White Dwarf magazines.
Nowadays, you can go onto Instagram, Pinterest, any of those sites, and there is a massive amount of amazing painters out there doing new things every day.
Hey, you're watching that kind of content right now. And Jen, what did you find working with all the fancy tools?
I found, if anything, using all of the really nice tools just made the experience more smoother. I could try out new things, and at the end of the day, I'm actually pretty happy with this result. I go back and maybe try some new things next time, but I'm really happy. It is a bit weird painting your own face though. I don't think I'm ever going to get over that though.
I think it's super awesome that you've got that, and that's a really cool thing. And it's super cool that these busts came out as well as they did.
If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe to check out all our awesome other videos that we have.
And final thoughts for the Red Grass Games painting lamp. Jen, what did you think?
I think it's really versatile, and I like how sturdy it is. Like, it's not gonna sort of fall over or be really flimsy. The lighting is really good, and I actually really like it.
I think it's a very good product. I do think that as it is still top lighting, sometimes in a dark environment, you're still gonna have to worry about side lighting a little bit. But I did like that you can angle the 2 LEDs, and it definitely was better than any tabletop painting lamp I have ever used. Genuinely. Mostly I've used the bar lights from hardware stores and also tabletop desk lamps, and it is elevated above both of those quite significantly. The one thing I did think would have been really cool on the Red Grass Games lamp is that the head of the lamp can't rotate. And I know the individual individual lights rotate, but they have sort of a restricted range of motion of maybe 90 degrees. So not being able to turn the head as well was a little bit restrictive in our painting setting. But that's about the only criticism I could find. So get out there, paint, have fun, whatever.
If you'd like to check out Redgrass Games for yourself, all of the links will be down in the description below, and you can see some really cool stuff that they have.
Make it so.
So you're gonna do a 10th edition battle report?
Where'd that come from?
I don't know, I'm just trying to end the video.
Oh, just to end the video. Liam, just end the video.
Just end the video then.
Just cut to black at some point. Gunshot fade to black. There you go, that's how you end it.